You're listening to a special episode of the Jerusalem Post podcast travel edition, marking 1 year since the tragic events of October 7th, 2023, and all that has followed.
Hi, David.
Hi. This is not exactly how we were planning on introducing our 1 year to the 7th of October anniversary episode. We were planning on doing that in our studio in Modi'in in Israel.
But with the news over the last week, we actually thought this would be an appropriate time to do this. We are currently in Greece recording a future podcast. And as we've been here, there has been a lot going on in Lebanon. The supreme leader of Hezbollah has been killed. Lots of flights into Israel have been cancelled. We're hoping to go back to Israel on Monday morning. But it sums up what we're going to talk about in today's podcast is what happened a year ago, how it affected travel, and some of the stories around that.
We'll be hearing during this podcast from a couple of guests, and they really will tell the story through their own eyes. We'll be hearing from El Al, and we'll be hearing from somebody who deals with incoming tourism to Israel. Let's, if you will, just look at the latest news. We are talking to you right at the end of September 2024. In the last 24 hours or so, as you've said, all hell has broken loose in Lebanon. Just a few moments ago, we were trying to figure out if we're going to be able to get home okay. The European air authorities urged all European airlines not to fly to Israel. Even though that is short term, the effect that that type of message must have on the airlines, and more significantly on potential future visitors to Israel, must be enormous.
Following the announcement and following the cancellation by a large number of airlines, there was an announcement today that El Al would supplement their flights and send more flights through Athens and through Larnaca. And it's kind of appropriate that we will be talking to a representative of El Al today about the events of October the 7th and the year since October the 7th and how El Al responded to the crisis. After October the 7th, we took a break for a month, and then we spoke to a number of people. We spoke to Morgan from the Elkanin Hotel about the tragic loss of one of their team members. We spoke to 2 or 3 people involved with the travel industry from the Ministry of Tourism, people involved with incoming tourism and outgoing tourism. And everybody was talking about hoping not to lose Hanukkah, hoping to bounce back by Pesach. We're now a year later, Rosh Hashanah is around the corner, and Israel is still at war. And if anything, I would say the economy, the tourism industry is more affected than it was 6 months ago.
Let's take a quick break, and then we will turn to El Al, the Israeli airline.
You're listening to the Jerusalem Post podcast travel edition with David Harris and Mark Gordon.
El Al, of course, if you are listening to a Jerusalem Post travel podcast, you will be familiar with. Many of you, I'm sure, have flown with El Al, or at least know of the company's reputation, both in terms of safety, thankfully, and also its reliability, the dependence that Israelis and Jewish people and lovers of Israel have, knowing that even when all the others cancel, El Al and a couple of other Israeli airlines will continue flying to make sure that people get home safely.
El Al, being Israel's national airline, is obviously very central to tourism in Israel.
Here's Sharon Brownstone, who is the General Counsel for El Al. Before we talked about the company and how it's been dealing with the last year, we asked her about her personal story through these 12 months.
As everybody here in Israel, it's been the toughest year I've ever had. It started on October 7, and we thought that this day was the worst that we've ever seen and we will ever see. And after that, during the months that we've been through and everything, we see that it can be worse. We start seeing all the stories, and I have also some people that I know, friends and relatives of friends that were killed or murdered, whether as soldiers or in the Nova Party. The stories are horrible. I don't have tears left. I find myself thinking a lot about what the future holds for the state of Israel. I'm an optimistic, but I still think that we still have a lot to go in order to get into a better place, better country, and better citizens in the state of Israel. But as I said, I'm optimistic. Something good will happen from all of this horrible situation. But this year has been tough.
We're looking at October the 7th and the 12 months after that. And there were iconic images in that first month of planes coming home to Israel full of reservists, people singing, people sitting on the floors. Tell us about that first month for El Al.
We started from the first minute to operate in a war mode. It was a Saturday. Usually El Al doesn't do any activity on Saturdays, but we did realize that we have to send some people to the call center because there were thousands of passengers that are trying to call El Al and see if we can help them get into the country or out of the country. Since that Saturday, we helped thousands of people, whether they booked or they had a ticket booked with El Al and whether they didn't. People were going to El Al's counters, whether it's in the US or in Europe or in the Far East, begging for a ticket. And I think El Al, and I'm not putting any criticism on the government, but I think El Al from day one understood our role in the war. We knew that we have the limited aircraft that we had. We knew we have limited seats. I remind you that it was the end of the peak of the holidays, but we knew that we had to do everything we could in order to fly the Israeli citizens that had to be called into the reserve, soldiers, or medical staff, or any other case that we had stories, horrible stories. All of us in the El Al management have messages that were received that day or the days after from people with horrible stories about people that have relatives that got murdered or others, and they have to come to the funeral or they have to come for the hospitals to help others, or people from the south. And we did whatever we could. Everybody in El Al, it's every employee of El Al understood exactly his role at those moments. We said, if you've been called to the army and you need to go to get to Israel, just show us, the proof or whatever there is that you have, and we will fly you for free. And we flew people on aircraft sometimes without seats, on jump seats or sitting on the floor. My son, just before the war, he finished the army. He was in one of the elite units, and he went with his girlfriend to work in the US just for a few months. And when October 7 happened, he called me and he said, okay, Ima, they are calling me. You have to fly me back. I have to come and fight. And I said, I'm not going to fight. I was, shocked like everybody. I said, just stay wherever you are. He said, you work for an airline. If you're not going to fly me, I'm going to find a way and I'll pay for a ticket. You're going to fly me back. And they had to come from LAX and there was no seat. So we arranged a seat on a jump seat, and he flew back and he fighted whatever he needed to do. But it was the story of the state of Israel. It wasn't something unique. Everybody had the same story.
How has El Al been able to carry on flying consistently every day when other airlines have stopped? I think from October to December, there were maybe 4 or 5 airlines, mainly Israeli airlines, flying. But El Al hasn't missed a day since the war has started.
Our part was to keep the bridge between Israel and the world open. And this is what we focused on. And we had, and we still have, many challenges during this time. There are many risks. Some of them I cannot even disclose because of security. But there are many risks of operating an airline in a war zone and in a war atmosphere, I will say. There were many challenges that came to our attention as well as management. And every time a challenge came to our table, we found a solution. It was easy to say, okay, we're not flying. We're not flying there. We're not flying, to certain destinations where there are more risks. We were focused about our mission and what we have to do in this war for the people of Israel. We found solutions, and this is what we're still doing. We are managing the risks. Of course, there are risks, and we are managing them. But we are doing adjustments Some of them are known. For example, if we flew to Bangkok through a shorter route that goes over certain countries, we no longer go through these countries and we're doing a longer route. Or if our flight attendants or pilots, when they land in different countries, they would not go out of the airport with their uniform. They will take them out at the bathroom in the airport and will change to just regular clothes, so people will not be able to identify them as an Israeli airline staff, and many, many, many others. So we're doing a lot of actions in order to get the flights out of Israel and to Israel, but to maintain it in a safely mode. And of course, safety is our major concern. This is our obligation here as the Israeli flag carrier.
Talk to us about routes, because the routes that you fly must have been affected beyond what you've already said. The places that you go to, the demand from the customers. How has the war affected where you fly to?
So El Al did had few changes in its routes since the beginning of the war. There were some routes that we closed and stopped the operation. Some of them were due to security issues, like Turkish, Istanbul, and some of them were due to other reasons, like Johannesburg in South Africa. I don't know if everybody know, but El Al, any airline, has limited capacity of aircraft. Sometimes we get calls from ministers and say, why can't you add more flights to there and there and there? And we said, if I had the aircraft, I don't have an aircraft in my garage parking, and I can just, take it and put it to wherever I want. The aircraft are limited and they are flying nonstop. So if we close one destination that either commercially doesn't make sense or security cannot be operated, it makes it available for me to take this aircraft to other destination where the demand is higher or there is a need to add frequencies. So basically, this is what we did from the beginning of the war. We closed destination that we needed to close and took this aircraft, the equipment, to other places where we needed to add frequencies. We added a lot of frequencies to the US and to Europe, wherever we could, and we're all the time utilizing the aircraft to the most needed destinations according to whatever happens in the war.
Let's go back 4 years. During COVID-19, it was a really bad time for the aircraft industry and for El Al. El Al now seems to have recovered and seems to be a very successful airline again. What changes have been made and how has El Al recovered from where it was during COVID?
I remember the day where I got all my staff, the attorneys, and tell them, you're going on unpaid leave, but it's going to be very short, a week, 2, a month at the most. Unfortunately, I lost all of my staff because everybody found other jobs. When we had COVID, it was worldwide. Everybody had the same problems. The aviation industry was, as far as damages, was the ones that suffered the most. But then it was bad. I think we were here in the campus, instead of a few hundreds, we were like 20 or 30 employees that stayed and just kept the company closed. This is what we did. We didn't fly. We didn't have any operation at all some of the times. COVID did force El Al to take some efficiency measures. We laid off some of the employees. Out of 6,000, about a third of the employees were laid off. And we cut all the costs that were pre-COVID. Some of the items were given pre-COVID, and then the necessity of this cost were basically examined again. And so some of the costs were cut. We closed destinations that were not profitable. So El Al, when COVID ended, came back much more stronger. Of course, we had the change of control, the Rosenberg family that took control over the company, which gave us also some financial support and assistance. All of these steps makes El Al come out of COVID a better company, a more efficient company. When we finished COVID, basically, we thought the worst is basically behind us. That's it. From now, we're only going to raise up until October 7.
I flew El Al 4 or 5 days ago, but you can see a difference. The planes look newer, the menu has changed, the marketing has changed, the logos, the livery, everything has changed. What was the thinking behind revamping El Al as much as it has been?
COVID made a lot of procedures and processes that were used to be as a given for the company to be rethinked. And when you close everything at once, this is what happened during COVID, and you have to reopen, it gives you an opportunity to reevaluate everything that is in the company and to see what needs to be improved and what's not. one of, I'll say, goal that El Al has is the service. So El Al always wanted to give a good service with good food and good product. After COVID, we understood that we are missing some of that. So we decided to put a lot of attention and a lot of investments in this area. This is why we can say if 2 or 3 years after that we can see the change. We can see the change in the aircraft. We purchased, and we're still purchasing new aircraft, 737s and 787s. We just signed a big deal with Boeing to buy 31 737s. On the 787, we have the business class, which is a very nice class, and of course the premium and the tourist. So it enables us to give different products to different customers with different needs.
A couple of months ago, I think a lot of people who travel with you were very excited to hear your announcement about the fixed prices to 4 destinations, which were Larnaca, Athens, Dubai and Vienna. Over the next few months, are there plans to expand that? And then just talk a little bit about the immediate future, what you can predict in the short term, given everything that's around us, if you can predict anything.
Well, I have to say first that we have to understand that now in Ben Gurion, we are in a situation where the demand is much higher than the supply. That's why we are calling the other airlines, foreign airlines, to come back and fly, because El Al and the other Israeli airlines cannot fulfill all the demand. For the next few weeks, for El Al, for example, are almost fully booked. It's very hard for people to get seats in prices where they expected to have for flights. We wanted to help the people that needs to get to any place in the world, put basically a fixed price for 4 destinations, which is Athens, Larnaca, Dubai, and Vienna, which basically will be considered as hubs. So from this destination, and we checked it, of course, they can take connection flights to every place in the world that they would like. The prices for this destination is fixed, so they know what to expect. So instead of going from Tel Aviv to New York directly, they can take Tel Aviv, Vienna, and then Vienna, New York in a decent price that they can find within different airlines and different options they can find. This will help a little bit get the demand much more adjusted. Because now what happens is that a lot of people are trying to get seats for flights on El Al, and they can't. And they get really frustrated, and I can understand them. But in this way, they can go out of Tel Aviv, go to Athens, or go to Larnaca. It's a very short flight. And from there are many options to get a flight to wherever they want. Just the last few days, we're still suffering from a lot of cancellations of foreign airlines here in Ben Gurion due to the situation. The war is still going on. So as far as new destinations, of course, in our strategic plan that we had approved in 2023, we have new destinations in our mind and in our plan. Unfortunately, as the war is still going on, we can't really open new destinations. The only effort that we are putting into is adding more frequencies to the current ones, the ones that we see that the demand is very high. But of course, these things are being examined all the time. And if there is a change, we of course will make the adjustment and the changes.
Thank you for the insight into what's happening at El Al. I think it's very important as a part of the story for October the 7th. Sharon Brownstone, the General Counsel of El Al, thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Of course, let me just say that we hope for better days. I pray for the safety of all of our soldiers and the return of the hostages, and for peace to be in Israel.
This is the Jerusalem Post podcast travel edition with Mark Gordon and David Harris.
About 10 months ago, we spoke to Mark Feldman from Dizen House, and we asked him about how Israeli tourism would cope with the war. He gave a picture of hope that there would be groups coming in to visit Israel and eventually tourism would recover. A year later, we look at the picture again and we see, has that happened? And what is the picture today?
In order to do that, we've been speaking to Kim Melchior, who is the co-CEO of IGT, Israel Global Travel, which is a company that deals with incoming tourists to Israel?
The business of tourism in Israel, it's a weird business. We've had these roller coasters coming up and down for the last many, many years. Every like 3-4 years, there is this operation either in Gaza or in Lebanon, and tourism stops for a month, for 2 months. We've experienced intifada. We've seen it all. That's what we thought until March 2020. Then Corona struck. For almost 2 years, totally eliminated every effort to be in a business of tourism, not only in Israel, but in many other countries, but Israel even more so than most other countries. What we did is that we really tried to rebuild our business, rebuild the company. We brought in a lot of good people, and we went back to the original size of the workforce, which is about 70, 75 employees. And we were really on the way to see a very positive development and a good year. Then October 7 came, and everything has been very challenging since then. Very.
How important is tourism, and especially incoming tourism, to the Israeli economy?
Incoming tourism is very, very, very big importance, because it doesn't only give employment to people like me who work in a company that brings in the tourists, but it has a huge impact on everybody who works in secondary businesses. Of course, hotels, but also restaurants, taxi drivers, sites, buses, guides. There are so many sectors in the Israeli business world that live from tourism, and they can all feel that their income has gone dramatically down in the last year.
After October the 7th, the tourists that we did see coming in were essentially solidarity tourists coming to show their support with Israel. Some were coming to see family, but mainly we were seeing groups of people coming in. 11, 12 months later, are those tourists still coming in, or has that died down?
I have to tell you that we've been very fortunate in the company that I work for with IGT. We've had, over the last 10, 11 months, around 100 solidarity missions. We are working a lot with a lot of Jewish institutions, especially in North America. And we've had both the solidarity missions, but also had Board of Governors meetings, conferences, conventions. A couple of the larger Jewish foundations have come here. And we've been able, at least until 2 months ago, to survive through that, for which we are very appreciative. But it is correct that the number of solidarity missions is going down. It's a very natural effect, because once a Jewish community, a synagogue, a Jewish institution, organization has already sent 1 or maybe 2, 3 solidarity missions, there's a limit to how many solidarity missions they can bring here and how often the same people want to come and show solidarity. We're trying, of course, to be creative in creating the itineraries and show them things and meet them up with people who they haven't seen before. But the number of solidarity missions have gone down. That's correct.
There's said to be an ice cream van at the memorial site for the victims of the Hamas attack on the Nova Music Festival. Do you think it's a good sign that there are so many people going to visit it that it needs those facilities, or do you think that these sites are becoming commercialized?
Well, I don't know if they're being commercialized. If there is an ice cream van, I don't know that. But if there's an ice cream van there, it's probably because there is a need and people are interested in buying an ice cream or buying some kind of refreshment. We're always looking to find a way to get into some kind of normalcy. If there's something which I've felt over the last year is that nothing is normal. What happened on October 7 was definitely not normal. And the whole atmosphere since then has given us a sense that everything is extraordinary and not in a good sense. You can also say that even bringing in solidarity tourism and people coming in and wanted to do photo opportunities and taking pictures at the place of the Nova Festival or taking pictures in the kibbutzim that were so badly hit. It's also a sort of a normalcy of turning the situation into that kind of normal reaction. But I have a feeling that within a few years, we're going to see a totally different way of looking back at October 7th. You have to remember also that a lot of the kibbutz members who lived in the south, and those who survived, of course, in the beginning, they were very eager to tell their story. They wanted to meet up with groups. They wanted to tell their experience. They wanted to share what they've gone through and their friends and family. And with time, they felt that it was too much for them. They could every day go and tell the story, and they felt that they needed to focus on themselves and move into more private reactions. And I think that that's part of what we will see in the future.
Let's change the topic a bit and go to the financial side of things. So as we've already said, the country's really suffered because tourism is so central to the economy. The government did step in to some extent to help the sector. So who did the government help and who didn't the government help?
I have to go back to the time of COVID, because during the pandemic, the government did step in and did realize that the tourism sector was a sector where everybody were hit so hard and suffered for so long. For instance, the way that they support the possibility of getting unemployment support if you're out of work, they prolonged that period to a very large extent during COVID. In this case, they haven't done that. During COVID, everything was shut down. In this case, the Israeli airlines have been flying since October 7. Whilst a lot of Israelis and a certain number of foreigners have enjoyed that, that meant that the economy of the Israeli airlines, both El Al, but also Israel and Arkia, they have done very well economically since October 7. Therefore, all of the employees of the airlines have been taken care of and don't need any financial support and no support from the state. The same goes to a certain extent for the hotels. Unfortunately, Israel has had so many people that have to be placed in hotels, first from southern Israel and then later from northern Israel, and some of them are still there. I know of a hotel chain who, for a period of time, had more than 20,000 evacuees staying within the hotel. Whilst this is very difficult and critical situation for the people, it meant that at least a lot of the hotel employees had a lot to do.
Just to interrupt at that point, so we should say here that it was the government that was underwriting this operation, right?
The government were paying a certain amount, it was not a huge amount, but a certain amount to the hotels for having these evacuees staying in the hotel. Therefore, also the hotels have been doing pretty okay. It's not the same amount they could get for a hotel room as they could get for a nice group of tourists from North America, but they've managed and they've survived, which means that the pressure that lobby groups and groups of interest have been able to put on the government to support the tourism has mainly been for incoming tour operators like myself, who had losses. We have had a decrease in income of around 80% compared to last year. And we, in my company, are probably in the best shape of all the companies in Israel. So if we have had a decrease of 80% in income, so the situation is very bad. Recently, the government has finalized a plan for how to support these companies and how to compensate them somehow for the lack of income via a program to support them in the salaries they're paying to their employees. Personally, it doesn't help my company a lot. And unfortunately, the program comes, we are now a year after October 7, and a lot of people have already left the industry and left the business. Some companies have closed the offices and are not expected to reopen. It's too little, too late.
I know it's very difficult to predict the future. The war is continuing. How do you see the next 12 months going?
At the moment, we see a tendency of a different kind of tourism where we are happy to provide as well. We're working together with a lot of Israel's finest event producers, and we are working with them on bar mitzvahs and the weddings. A lot of Jews from around the world at the moment are planning to do in Israel, also as a show of support. And we see an increase in that kind of tourism in our company. We hope very much that at some point there will be a peaceful situation which will allow, first of all, of course, our kidnapped people to come back to Israel, our soldiers to come back home, and people who have been evacuated from their homes to move back home. Once that has been taken care of, then we see that there is a definite potential for tourism to come back to the level it was before. Personally, I think that it will probably not be in the same speed that tourism came back after COVID. I think that groups and organizations, synagogues, communities will be more hesitant. It'll take some time before they will register and sign up for a tour to Israel, because they probably want to make absolutely sure that peace is not only on a piece of paper, but that it's actually happening in the country.
Perhaps the hardest question of all, because it's, I guess, very easy for us to look back at the last 12 months in such a negative way with tears in our eyes in terms of what it's done to the nation and the Jewish people and our supporters, and obviously what it's done to your profession. But what's given you hope? What's given you positivity from the last 12 months?
There's only one thing which gives me hope. That is the people of Israel. I think that the people of Israel has responded in a fabulous way. The people that we've met, the stories we've heard, and unfortunately we hear so many amazing stories about some of the young men and women who have been killed either on October 7 or in battle since then. We see so many people and so many organizations and so many initiatives and volunteers all over Israel. And I think that level of solidarity with the land of Israel and with the people of Israel, that is what gives us hope to move forward. Because hopefully these people who show this care for the country, they will also be able to present the future leadership of the country. And there has been such a gap between the leadership and the people of Israel that I hope so much that the people will be able to show that the level of compassion that they have shown to each other is something that we can take into also peaceful times.
Kim Melchior, the CEO of IGT, Israel and Global Travel, thank you for coming on the show. More details are available at igt.co.il. David and I are very lucky to do this podcast. We've travelled more than 20 times to various countries. We've got the chance to experience life in other countries, in other communities, to meet rabbis and Jews and tour operators and restaurateurs and talk about relaxation. I know for a lot of our listeners, the last year has been very difficult, and we hope that we've brought some element of relief and optimism about what to do in the future.
If we can end on a positive note, perhaps it's this. The war situation will at some point cease. There will be some form of calm in this region. Hopefully one day it will be something stronger than just calm. And tourists like yourselves will return. The airlines will come back. The cruise companies will come back. And service will be resumed as normal. Perhaps the word that I've heard more than any other used about Israel and indeed the Jewish people and our supporters over the last 12 months is the word resilience.
It can seem frivolous to talk about tourism and travel when we're still waiting for around 100 hostages to be returned home as of today. I know when we were talking to friends 10, 11 months ago, they could think of nothing other than making sure their families were safe. They couldn't envisage traveling. And as time has gone on, especially through the summer, travel and getting out of Israel and getting a break has provided a relief, a way of relaxing their mind, relaxing themselves and preparing themselves for what's going to happen. We hope in the future that tourism provides more than just relief. It provides fun and relaxation. We hope we can bring you that fun and that joy over the next 12 months.
Please reach out to us with your thoughts about this podcast. You can do that either via social media at MarkDavidPod or send us an email to markdavidpod@gmail.com. What we hope we can promise is that we plan on continuing every 2 weeks, give or take, a podcast about travel and tourism and bringing you places that we think are of value for you to travel to. We'll give you the kosher details, the vegetarian details, the Jewish story and the generic story of places around the world. So please join us in what we hope will be a much better year ahead as we travel around this world. Let's finish this particular edition of the podcast with a special song. It's Hatikva, which is the Israeli national anthem. And in this case, it's being sung by the young people of the Meir Shafea Youth Village in northern Israel. Many of the people that you are going to be listening to were refugees themselves coming into Israel from Ukraine during the war, along with others from around the world and Israeli young people who live together in a village which is supported by Hadassah, the Women's Zionist Organization of America.
We wish you a Shana Tova and a peaceful New Year.
Amen.